Welcome to the Beyond Membership podcast, where we are uncovering what drives associations forward and how the suite of Momentive software products accelerates that momentum. Well, hey, Rob, we're recording here on Monday, April 21st, and we both just got back from a long weekend. What'd you get up to this weekend?
Well, we celebrated Easter by actually driving our van. We have one of these little camper vans into the Everglades and kind of went off grid for a couple of days and saw some alligators and some snakes and had a really nice long weekend. What about you?
I also had a nice long weekend, but stayed close to home as I usually do. And just, visited family and actually went bowling. So yeah, I had to beat my niece. It was her first time bowling without bumpers. So to make sure that she knew who was in charge. So I did beat a 12-year-old at bowling. It was great. Yeah, very fun. And so obviously, yeah, we're back here recording another episode, and we are very lucky to be joined by a longtime Nimble AMS customer, the CFO of the Economic Club of Chicago, Andrew Leasure. Andrew, it's really great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
So as is customary for us here, we like to ask our guests to tell us something interesting about themselves, right off the bat, so we can talk about that. What do you got for us?
I don't know that I have anything too interesting going on, but I've got two daughters that are both 9 right now. So they're in 3rd grade, and basically we're at the height of our game there. So I think, a lot of my life is going to soccer games, soccer practices, dance, whatever hobbies they happen to be fascinated with. But I guess one interesting thing that we're passionate about, and I'm passionate about, my family, we do a lot of music. So we play a lot of music around the house, and that's our MO for winding down and vegging out. And basically anything that'll get you away from a screen, even dabbling in puzzles a little bit these days. But I'm sure as you both know, excess time is usually not a problem that we have.
So, Andrew, I have to compliment you and your organization on quite the coup you had last week or so, getting Jeremy Powell to speak at your organization. It shows like the real important role your organization plays in, the national dialogue.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, we're very proud of it. So we're in the event planning business, and it's one of the toughest industries to thrive in. And I've been with the Economic Club for over a decade. And I learned very quickly joining the organization that event planning is kind of a beast of its own. When I joined years and years ago, the Economic Club of Chicago is a wonderful, I say 100-year-old organization. We're 98. We'll be turning 100 in 2 years. And so a lot of our strategic work the last 3-4 years has really been kind of targeting this 100-year anniversary date, and then thinking about, how do we position so that we're just as relevant and successful for the next 100 years. So yeah, we were very excited our mission is to encourage dialogue on important topics. And I think over the last several years, we've really learned that important dialogue can be tough to talk about. And if you think about historically the types of speakers that we are focused on global thought leaders and thought leadership. But we are a membership organization. We have 2,400 members that are business and civic leaders in Chicago. They are chief decision makers for global companies around the world. But there's a real anchor of, Chicago's embedded in the DNA of a lot of these companies and a lot of these professionals and C-suites. And so, we historically have had a lot of chief decision makers that have come to speak to the club over the years. You can even go back and into the 90s and 80s and the 70s, and you can see even in the rich history of our minutes, anytime there are kind of macroeconomic issues or pressure kind of on the national or global stage, it can be very hard to speak openly and honestly about an issue, especially if you're kind of on one side of the coin. So being able to have the chair of the Federal Reserve was a big undertaking. And we really kind of only had 3 or 4 weeks to pull together a program that we felt needed to be live streamed to the country. Because a big piece of this is we want to make sure that the conversation is transparent, open, free of any appearance of manipulation, because we're a nonpartisan organization. We don't take sides on any issue. And we really try to do a good job to make sure that if there is a duality to a conversation, that we represent both sides of that. So I think for us, an event like that last week that goes off without a hitch, what I mean by that is typically when the content of the event takes off, speakers, moderators, there's a magic that happens. But I joke around in our team anytime we have a new colleague that'll join the organization, you can't even enjoy programs live ever again. Because a lot of times you're so busy focusing on the logistics of all the movement around the event, all the things that typically the audience aren't looking at, which is the stage, the timing, how many minutes ahead are you, how many minutes behind, the audiovisual considerations, the logistics of moving lots of people in and out of the space safely and securely. So we were really proud of the event last week, and it obviously made news headlines, and that's not necessarily our goal, but I think the goal of getting folks to talk about important issues, we couldn't be more pleased. And for us, we spend a lot of time on strategy. So Rob, our hunch is that our mission of encouraging dialogue is going to be in demand for a long time. So we're feeling optimistic.
You couldn't think of, I think, too much more important dialogue really to have surfaced, especially since 2020 and COVID, right? Like the Fed minutes are, everybody's watching. And I said in a previous episode, like, I'm a free market enjoyer. I very much like to observe things happening and kind of read the tea leaves or the data that's coming. And I think there's not a more informative piece of information than what you get directly from either, what the Fed is saying or what their balance sheet is saying, right? So it's very, very interesting to me.
Yeah, I'll share, Jake, one more. I'll give you a little bit of insider baseball. This was a kind of a personal observation and opinion, but Jerome Powell mentioned in his remarks that actually when he became chair of the Federal Reserve, we were lucky enough in Chicago to be able to host him for his first public event back in, I believe it was 2017. Yeah, and the video's online and all that good stuff. And, but at that first event, he busted out charts and data. I mean, and so I was a little disappointed in this last one because given how quickly it rolled up, and then we've learned that charts and data can bore an audience to death, especially a virtual audience. But there are sometimes, man, where I do think for every once in a while, I'm like, what, let's get the charts out. Because I do think there's a group of folks that just want to see the overwhelming data. Yeah, it's great because we get to pick and choose the topics, and then you can kind of really nerd out in those moments. And it's totally socially acceptable because you know what you're getting into.
You got a new YouTube subscriber in this guy over here, and that's a plug for the Economic Club of Chicago's YouTube. So you're doing a lot of really obviously work in your area in Chicago, and we were talking a lot about work that you've done with local organizations, potentially helping them get started or get kind of more of an outcome-based mindset and to make progress and do the things that associations do best, which is really help people network and get, that cooperation in an industry or in a group of people who have a shared kind of vision and to actually get things done. You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Well, I think too, I've got to give a little bit of background because we operate in at times it can feel like a unique ecosystem. But we, at the Economic Club of Chicago, we're a nonprofit that has a membership base that are representative of the industries of Chicago. And if you think about economic bones of Chicago, Chicago is in the news quite a bit, and we can, there's good news and bad news. But economically, Chicago has a ton going for it and great bones. We have industry representation really across the board. A lot of major cities may be lacking some representation in certain industries, but it's a very robust ecosystem and market. And so when we, our membership, we have metrics that we benchmark to using Department of Labor statistics, and we really try to mirror the demographics of Chicago's industry and the C-suite in itself. At the same time, we're a nonprofit. So, when I joined years and years ago, I recall I've got a background in public accounting, and I was in the audit and assurance business. And so you get to see a lot of clients, you get to see a lot of culture, especially when you're a young professional running around. And that can be very informative. What I found was that the club kind of felt like a 90-year-old startup that also was very formal and at times very casual. And, I think it's the DNA of operating and talking to C-suites that are Fortune 500 C-suites. There's a level of sophistication that the club has always had in its DNA. But at the same time, we are that startup vibe and that nonprofit vibe that you get when you're at a civic or an association anywhere in the world. So when I think about all of these different hats that the organization wears, we are a small organization, but at a lot of times it feels like we're kind of the hub of a wheel. One of my favorite terms that I heard from a mentor years ago in this space was orchestrated serendipity. And I think there's this magic that happens when you can connect the right folks together. If we do this correctly, we can make 1 + 1 = 3. And that doesn't make a lot of sense in most circles that you might run in professionally. But I do think in the nonprofit world, connections are so important to delivering those outcomes that so many small organizations that have a very specific mission and a very specific focus. So we kind of sit a little farther upstream. With being in the event planning, we do get to pick and choose the topics that we can focus on, and we have the privilege to be able to shine a spotlight on a topic and then to exit that conversation because we typically need to move on. Many nonprofits that we interact with, and we have many chief decision makers that work for wonderful nonprofits that are headquartered in Chicago. It's the same focus, but it's the same constant focus on a mission that brings its own set of complexities and problems. But typically when you start talking about connecting, that's where you can have that magic really delivered of, okay, well, how do we take the resources that we have? How do we take everything on the books? And then how do we collaborate in this community so that we can deliver exponentially more value? And, for us at the Economic Club, we're focused on our members and our education initiatives of hosting this dialogue and sharing it with the public at large. But, if the Federal Reserve is coming in and we're focused on, economic issues at the time, we'll talk to organizations that are in that space and we'll talk about, well, who should be in the room and who should have access to the conversation, and are there questions that we should be considering? And we really collaborate till we get to the end of that road. So this ecosystem that we've been operating in for years continues to grow and thrive. And, I think historically Chicago was a very, very different town when you compared to a lot of other cities, and that there was sort of a civic obligation that many of our leaders were expected to participate in, to take ownership of. And you still see traces of that DNA today where, on a volunteer basis, we have our members are, assisting with issues near and far from the city itself. So yeah, every conversation I'm typically in is a conversation about outcomes. And it's sort of, okay, well, how do we get the right folks in the right combination at the right time so that we can hopefully deliver an outcome that's exceptional for whatever the topic is.
Andrew, when we had talked before, you had mentioned to me that because we're talking about connections here, you also are part of a group of nonprofits that connect maybe on a monthly or quarterly basis. Tell us a little bit about how that works and maybe the value that provides to your organization or you're providing to them.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of kind of that 1 + 1 = 3. And some of the background, it's an informal group of it's, for us, we try to focus on folks that are the head of operations or HR or finances, but really having an anchor at similar size nonprofits so that there's a collaborative space where folks can get together and have access to, a higher level of sophistication. And the way that this manifested is during the pandemic, as many organizations were kind of stuck working on either converting their workforce to virtual, finding a way to work and thrive. We used to print everything else out in the office, and now we're working on Microsoft 365. And how do we kind of move through the widgets of that? There were also PPP loans happening at that time. And I think a lot of the nonprofits in many industries, pick an industry, I think folks were calling around asking for help and trying to find an anchor and a solution. And that was really one of the kind of moments in my career where it was, boy, no one's stepping up to solve these very tangible problems. And it felt like they were all solvable. So, rather than continuing to take calls, we said, well, why don't we just start a monthly meeting and we'll try to get representation from all these wonderful nonprofits and associations and civic organizations in Chicago. And let's we use Chatham House rules, and we meet monthly. It's a number of wonderful organizations that still meet. And the concept is we're not going to name names when we're in the meeting, but we're going to talk about relevant problems. And we're going to talk about how do we deliver. Everyone is so micro-focused on their mission and the outcomes for their constituents that you can't help but feel like you want to assist in some way. And what's even more beautiful is when you do get, I think now there are over 24 organizations that regularly participate. And it's tough with scheduling, but we kind of have this anchor meeting where folks know that they can come and submit questions. And I think that that's where we've seen a lot of magic happen. And that's a very kind of visible example of what we're talking about, of this concept that 1 + 1 in certain circumstances can equal 3. And it started with the pandemic era, and it continued into talking about public health issues, especially for organizations like mine. There are a number of organizations that do very large public events, and at the time finding a way to have important dialogue in a very safe environment, it was a real challenge with a lot of unknowns. And that's where this serendipity can open up, because one organization maybe had access to a very specialized professional services group, or a law firm that was donating their time. And so rather than having one organization micro-focused on this issue, one organization could open the door, and all of a sudden a dozen nonprofits can come in, and there can be kind of a shared thinking and a shared problem solving. So it's been extraordinarily fulfilling to be in this space. And I think it's, one of the, for my personal career, it's been one of the bright spots of just really getting, and I'm sure you guys enjoy it too, sitting where you are, because it's the same concept that I'm sure Momentive, your professional colleagues deal with regularly, which is hearing at the end of the day a problem. And I'm sure it's more technical focused, but it's thinking about, okay, well, how do we help to deliver a better outcome? And I think that's the magic. And when you can get really good at that, you can start to feel like anything's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely resonate with that. I think probably a little bit more technical, yes, but it's one of those things where there's that need, and you can see your work be immediately impactful. And it's incredibly, it's not only just awesome to work together to that outcome, it's actually incredibly rewarding, as you were mentioning before as well, for yourself and your own personal growth, or just the growth of your career, to see the progress, to actually see yourself help somebody else, or see the impact of your work directly. One thing being, especially on the software side, is you build things, but you don't often get to hear directly from people who are using it. And when you do, it's so awesome to hear oh, on a daily basis, they're opening that thing that I built that I was really proud of, and they're using it. And it's helping them do something. It's helping them achieve a goal. And of course, with associations and nonprofits, that goal is oftentimes a general good, which is, just takes it to the next level.
Well, Jake,
yeah.
I'll share it even, you probably have experienced this in your own right, but I'll call it out, because we still, anytime we have a new colleague or a new vendor or a member that comes in and looks at how we work, one of the first things we'll typically do is we talk about our KPIs and our key metrics that we are micro-focused on. And systemically we use Nimble AMS and Salesforce. We have a number of KPIs that we track in real time. And a lot of the stickiest tools for our members have been those digital technological solutions where folks can engage on our website behind the member portal, safely, securely behind the login. We just watching the numbers move. And for us, it's there's kind of a magic that happens. And I've heard it described in other industries as well. We've had a couple of speakers come in and talk about this in their own for-profit industries, but we literally our team will say, well, we've got an idea. We're looking at, a good data set of member feedback and member engagement. And we think that if we have a conversation around this topic, that there's really an audience that's so focused on this issue. And then just being able to take these ideas, test them, release them into the wild, and then to watch the metrics live to see if it's sticky enough where people interact with it. That has been one of the joys, I think, of kind of this new technological age, where an organization like ours that historically was too small to have these really sticky tools for their constituents, all of a sudden we can. And oh boy, we can have dashboards and watch the data in real time. And whether we're bringing in a global vendor that's seen it all. Everyone is always so excited to watch those numbers move in real time. Years ago, when we moved to the member portal, it was even just watching people log in the morning. I remember our team, was kind of huddled around a desk, and we were like, there's 200 people, for a membership of 2,400. There was a time when that was, now we have hundreds of members logging in every day, and there's a lot, we have a lot on our website to engage with and interact with. We kind of take the Goldilocks approach to engagement and programming now. We do the very big programs, but we also have, very small engagement opportunities. As you can imagine, the conversation with the three of us is a little more intimate, a little more meaningful than if there were 47 other people on this, virtual call. So it's, a time and a place for everything. And just, I think that's another call out that I'm sure you probably see it in watching your clients build wonderful things and helping to deliver those outcomes. But we kind of see it every day and track in our KPIs, and the team still to this day is just like, it worked. You can hear people watching whatever KPI they're micro focused on, or sometimes, it didn't really move the meter, which, it happened.
Andrew, you mentioned how many members you have. How many staff does your organization have? I think our listeners would find that interesting to know.
Yeah, we are a team size of 17, and it's, if you think about the type of professional that is attracted to mission-based work, you're going to find some of the most dynamic, hardworking, and sharp professionals. Folks that, I don't think, I haven't heard a phrase like, is that my, that's not my job. Is that my job? Typically it's folks that are like, what do you need? Do you need me to sweep? On days of the program, I'm just part of the programs team. And I report with everybody else because we're so focused. We use the hats metaphor, and I'm sure you guys do. Everybody's always wearing lots of different hats. And in that small organization space, and it's not just nonprofits, I think a lot of small startups and small organizations feel this too, but I work on a team that's incredibly passionate. We are surrounded by opportunity generally. And I actually spend a lot of my time talking to my colleagues about what the best prioritization of opportunity is. Because we live in an ecosystem where our members are naturally asking for a lot and we want to deliver a lot, but we really try to focus on a data first approach where we're using kind of that magic as well of that anecdotal learnings that we've had where, some of my colleagues that have been around for a long time, like I have, that intuitively can see an opportunity and then to use data from the system to really justify that decision making so that if we do need to invest incrementally, we have a really good roadmap for how to do that and how to show our board that this is the right place to put our time and our money because it's going to get the biggest bang for our buck. And then to be able to track those metrics on the back end to say, well, did it actually work? We've really hit our stride over the last 5-6 years to shifting towards more of a data first approach. But I do think it's like, and I don't know if you guys feel this way too, but I think the more you learn, I think you naturally also realize the more you don't know anything at all,
right?
How much farther there really is to go. So actually, most of my conversations with my team are, I love all those ideas, and we're gonna write all of these wonderful ideas down, but we actually have to think about where the best opportunities are and how we deploy the resources that we have judiciously and impactfully.
Yeah, well, you have to have that feedback loop in place to kind of guide yourself, but you do have to also trust some level of intuition at times. We have that exact same sort of dilemma on the R&D side when trying to decide what to do on our roadmap, right? Like there's so many trade-offs.
Right.
When you get enough customers, members, right? They have a lot of ideas and they are very good ideas. And they obviously mean something to them, but there's something deeper in there, and it does take some intuition to kind of dig that out. And then once you have that data and it's flowing,
right.
It's both a motivator and can confirm or potentially confirm that you're wrong, which is good as well.
Well, and an example of that too, Jake, was, and I'm trying to find examples that are right in the Momentive ecosystem. But during the pandemic, I made a joke about 50 people on a Zoom. During the pandemic, we were learning in real time what was fun and what wasn't. And of course, you're using your intuition because you can just see on a call when it's not working, obviously. You still get that awkward social dynamic, but then you have the stickiness of, okay, well, who's continuing to engage, who falls off? And when you look at the data, where is it going? It was July of 2020, as an organization, felt like we made the transition really smoothly. We felt like we were able to really deliver on our mission in that space. But there was a Zoom fatigue that was happening in Chicago where I think, for a while there wasn't anything to do. So there was, the members were engaging with everything that we did. We were rolling up programming with these incredible speakers because, if you can imagine, a lot of times we're trying to partner with speakers that are in Chicago. And in 2020, we could kind of send speaker kits anywhere we wanted and really chat with some interesting folks and get their, real-time read on it. But we felt like there was a better way. And we kept saying, well, how do we use technology? Historically, we've done larger events. And for us, that can manifest. We do some very big black tie events with a keynote speaker, a global thought leader, where there can be 1,000 to 1,500 people. At that time, kind of that door was securely closed and the Zoom fatigue was setting in. And so, there was an idea, there wasn't any data to really prove it, but there was an idea from the team that was, okay, well, what if we democratize this process of hosting? And we've always relied on our members to chime in and, what do you want to talk about? But we wanted to use technology to address the economies of scale, those issues that you have when you're a team of 17 and you're saying, okay, well, yeah, it'd be great if we could get 10 people into a Zoom and let them talk about, I think the example back during the pandemic we used was foreign currency swaps. It's like, you're typically not going to have 1,000-person event where you pick a topic like foreign currency swaps because it's only going to be relevant to a couple dozen people in the membership. But we said, well, what if we let members raise their hand and offer to host, and maybe they're an expert in foreign currency swaps. And we said, well, the whole membership wouldn't be necessarily interested in that, but I bet you 7 or 8 people would. And for those 7 or 8 people, boy, what a great opportunity to create some serendipity where you can get folks together that might not even know each other that are operating in the same space. And what we quickly learned was, yes, that's 7 or 8 folks in a room with a chief decision maker that's oftentimes the expert in their space. The feedback was great. And so we started to watch, we did on a test basis some of these little programs where we let people submit the idea. We have ground rules so that we approve and make sure that folks understand how to have a productive and healthy conversation, especially on an issue that can be challenging to talk about. And the data started rolling in and members were engaging and they were sending surveys. We analyzed survey data in real time because we're constantly trying to find issues, errors, or opportunities. And then all of a sudden we said, well, it's working, but we're drawing a crowd that is more of our traditional academic crowd that's very interested in the topics, but we aren't, we haven't quite sold the networking crowd yet. The folks that are, for us, a lot of our younger members that's vocab that we use around the membership, but it's chief decision makers that are early in their C-suite career. And it's typically they're more focused on expanding their network. Whereas if you think about being on the back end of your professional career, if you're sitting on boards, you're typically wanting to reconnect because your network is expansive. So you're really trying to maintain relationships later on. And that's not always the case, but if we're, painting with broad brushstrokes, another team member during the pandemic came forward and said, well, hey, why don't we use Nimble's community hub and we'll just show who's registered. We can use Nimble's tools to edit this site ourselves. And we knew that a lot of the developers at Nimble were super busy, and we said, okay, well, I guess we'll try to build a few of these things ourselves. And it just kept getting stickier. And all of a sudden, our networkers, we had a hunch, there was no data, but it was, oh boy, do you think if we show who's registered for some of these and we let members know that, hey, when you register, you're going to be able to be seen that you're registered for this event. And members loved it. We were worried at first that folks might be concerned about privacy or concerned about security. And we really found that there is, again, kind of what we started the call off with, creating these little microcosms of opportunities where folks could get together. And at its best, I think we call this the member exchange platform. And it's where folks, they literally fill out a form, but that to host a topic, that form in Nimble creates all the data for the event records and really rolls up the automation so that we don't have to worry about the economies of scale. And then we just go through approve and focus on the people portion of it. Whereas, at the start of this, it was just, well, how are we going to create all these records? Who's going to do it? And, once we realized partnering with some of the very talented developers at Nimble that we could use technology to handle the economies of scale, well, it's perfect. It allows our team to really focus on getting people together. And that's where we started to see the serendipity of, in other industries of 1 + 1 = 3. But I will add it very quickly. I think one of the first events that took me by surprise, there were a couple, but it was one on music. It was just members that got together with instruments to like jam. And I was just like, yes. There was a conversation of like, is that a topic that, and we just felt like, yes, because, serendipity comes and goes in kind of mysterious ways. And the outcomes and the relationships that develop from those moments, whether it's, whiskey tasting together, or it's a substantive conversation about child hunger or homelessness in Chicago, there needs to be a place where folks can raise their hand. So yeah, Jake, that's a long example, but that is my favorite example of not having data, but having that intuition of an idea where you say, I think we've got something here, but we need to find a way to prove that it's working. And luckily, we were in a position where we could watch the data and continue to invest as it was working. So it worked out really well.
Needless to say, this episode's going to be titled Orchestrated Serendipity.
Hey, there you go. I love it. Yeah, and that's, I wish I could take that, coin that term, but it's one that's, I think, been living in Chicago for a long time.
Well, it's funny, Andrew, what you're kind of describing is, this concept of being able to see who's attending. It's like the old days when you'd arrive in a meeting and you'd survey all of the badges that were laid out to figure out who you wanted to make sure you went and said hello to while you're at the event. And you're just making that available to them online. It's a brilliant idea. And I can see why it's driving more engagement, because they might see either someone they know, someone they wanted to know, someone who they just know is an expert in that field. So they're going to want to have an opportunity to meet them. And so I'm sure that's where all of the intuition was telling you it was going to work.
Yeah, it can be very hard to work up the courage and the confidence as an organization that's small, because those big leaps of investment that are typically, investments in technology can be really scary, especially when you're so focused on that mission and you're just trying to deliver the outcomes for your constituents of your nonprofit. So it's one that's near and dear to me, and we've had such tremendous success on using the technology that we have with Momentive over the years. And I think it's going to continue to be one of those strategic enablers that allows us to find that magic to scale so that we can really continue to run home those opportunities for all 2,400 members and the public at large that we're trying to benefit beyond through sharing these conversations.
We got to help you make 1 + 1 = 3, right?
Exactly. And I think if everybody's focused on that, if you say that too, I think in some circles it doesn't make a lick of sense, but I really do believe in it.
Yeah, absolutely. That effort from everyone, you're really, when you talk about investment, you're going in and building your own kind of jam band app, right?
Right.
Where you can find if your neighbors want to get together and play some instruments together. It's really cool and really awesome outcome, right? And then maybe you didn't imagine that would be one of the things, but that's how effective that piece of software could be. And it's not that crazy, right? It's not like this you didn't have to invent something. It's just putting the pieces together, surfacing the data.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like we had just had the most brilliant technical idea ever. It was really just connecting the dots and having the confidence to try it and monitor. So any organization can really find that opportunity, but I have learned over the years that to actually make the execution attempt is so hard. And I do think that's where you need to have an ecosystem of partners that can build your confidence. And I do mean it, not just because we're on the call and I'm trying to be nice, but we were calling folks at Nimble AMS and talking it through, and it just took a little bit of confidence building, but all the technical conversations were like, yeah, that's all totally possible, easy peasy. And it was just from there it became so impactful. And yeah, you mentioned the jam band too. I think, Jake, a couple years after that initial rollout, we had another brilliant idea that came to fruition. And it's the idea was, it's just lunch, but professional, kind of one-on-one. How do we connect members one-on-one that maybe want to meet, expand their network, or even just meet with folks that they already know? And so, that idea went from a funny name at first of well, maybe it's just, it's just lunch, right? To all of a sudden it turned into, we've built this complex algorithm where our members can put their preferences in on how they like to connect, and kind of which industries or types of folks they're looking to connect with. And we have an algorithm that runs each month and scours all the data in our database and really tries to connect people to recreate that serendipity. So it's a similar journey. I won't go into that one because it's just as long, but it's kind of that story of, hey, it's just lunch is the intuition. You don't know what it's going to grow into, but fast forward to today, and it's been such an impactful kind of piece of the offering where our members have really had the opportunity to expand their network and meet other members on their terms. So it's funny how this stuff just continues to build and change and grow into these wonderful products that all of a sudden it's like they've always been there.
And they're delivering value. It sounds like that particular item is one that your members have proven out that they really wanted, which again, you talked about privacy before, that perhaps you might have thought there'd been an issue there, but again, the opportunity to connect under their terms seems to have been very successful.
Yeah, and I exactly, and I think it's how you execute matters as well. And so having those extra safeguards in the design, that's the piece where, anytime we partnered with really talented developers on your team, we bring all of that type A nuance. And sometimes I'm sure, like many of your customers probably feel, they're probably driving the developer crazy. But working with a partner that's patient enough to kind of let that chaos unfold so that they can understand, how you, like Rob, you mentioned privacy. That's one we think about constantly, because we don't want anyone to abuse a tool, but we also want to build a tool that can be used flexibly to let it grow and move. And yeah, I think some of those things that you worry about on the front end turn out to be non-issues, in any material sense down the road. So it's been really cool.
Good stories for sure.
Yeah, I could keep sharing we do love the platform and the journey we've been on, but yeah, I could share these little, we've really found a solace in kind of this virtual engagement that also bleeds out into event planning in real life. It's been really cool.
Yeah. And it's like, based on something that's kind of novel at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's not like super hard to grasp. It's very tangible. So it's seeing outcomes come from that. It feels empowering, right? It's just like, now you really can take these very simple ideas, as long as you put the energy and focus behind it, you kind of circle back with data that's telling you that you're on the right path or off the right path. And that sort of feedback loop just grows into a snowball.
And you put basically kind of a technology platform in place that has allowed you to then suddenly become creative in your driving towards these outcomes. And rather than it being a limiter, it's turned into something that's released your thinking and allowed you to do some really extraordinary things for your members, which is really cool.
It's the best, yeah. And some of my favorite, anytime we talk about these tools, specifically with members, we hide a lot of the magic that's happening, because we don't, why make it too complex? Why deliver paragraphs of instructions to an end user? At the end of the day, it either works or it doesn't. And so when we're scouring survey results, I love the survey results. And I saw some last month. It was a member that, it was in an anonymous survey that just said, you guys get so lucky every month with these matches. I have met people that have been running in my circles for years that somehow I haven't bumped into. And it's, our team, we're so proud of ourselves because, it's not luck.
Right.
It's a lot of data that is being used very responsibly, behind our member database where we are inferring, hey, it turns out these two folks both sit on nonprofit boards that are focused on child hunger. And they don't have any registrations next to each other in the system. We don't have any other cross sections where maybe they've already met. Why don't we put them together and see what happens? And usually that's where you see the survey result of how did you guys, and those are our favorite, I think, especially, and again, you've got to remember, I work with such a talented team of passionate young professionals. So being able on the back end, to your point, Jake, too, to watch the data and see that it's working. If you didn't have that piece of the loop, it almost wouldn't be worth it.
Right.
Like, because you'd hear it in passing, in the hallways of
Right.
Chicago, so to speak. It's a small town, but to be able to track the data and every time to say, did it work, is really empowering. And I think, Jake, you even mentioned earlier, like, even sometimes when it doesn't work, if you're willing to be honest, it can be hard at times to admit that it's not working, but it can be very empowering to stop because it's the right thing to do. And especially if you're lucky enough to be in a mission-based organization where you have a lot of opportunity, you're being asked to deliver a lot. That means that typically you can take those resources and spend them elsewhere. And you don't want to spend a lot of time squandering your resources. So it can be hard, but I find too that even the spots where we don't deliver on the outcomes that we thought we might be able to, being able to get out quickly and reroute those resources, that's to me just as fulfilling.
Yeah, for sure. It's like one other thing to kind of point out about this is how important a platform is over kind of a fully baked, closed off solution for being able to achieve these types of things. Like you aren't going to be able to do this without highly specialized staff, except you have Salesforce, you have Nimble AMS built on top of Salesforce that's like providing these tools for you to be able to build these experiences, probably with folks that maybe don't even never written a line of code in their life, right? And
Right.
so but they can achieve this, what the members see as a very highly sophisticated algorithm for seeing matches amongst the rest of the membership. I keep thinking of like eHarmony or Match.com, but it's similar. It's just on a professional scale, and it's more complicated than maybe they understand when they're saying it's lucky. But you're able to do it because of the platform. Like that is a super important piece of this for other associations or nonprofits that are listening to this. That's what is enabling this to happen.
Yeah, it's one that the platform thought is such an important one because I think the hardest calls I've taken the last few years are folks that they're typically members office that has seen the tools that we've built, and the question is, well, we'd love to build this in our space, in our industry. How do we quickly do it? And that concept of a platform, you can't just lift and shift it over and share it. You have to have all of these ducks in a row. So I think for us to get to the point where we are now, it took a lot of strategy and forward thinking, and everybody had to be pointed in the right direction. And I think the pandemic had us executing a little faster than we wanted to, but I think everybody felt that way. And so, yeah, that was another piece of being thankful of having the foresight. Had the club not invested 10 years ago in Nimble AMS, a lot of these options would have been off the table. And we did look at, several other solutions over the years because other organizations have wanted to replicate some of these tools. And it's very hard to work with a nonprofit that you admire, that you believe in their mission, you believe in them because they're so passionate, and to have to tell them, I don't think you're positioned to be able to do it. You'll have to take a different road to get to that outcome because the way that we did it just won't translate. That's it's tough when you're not able to make the math work.
Right.
So
yeah.
It can be bittersweet, especially when you're, an association or a nonprofit and you really do care. But I think that platform concept is so important. You've got to really think ahead. And the biggest conversation that I have with other nonprofits that are thinking about a technology upgrade are think long term. I mean, it's the platform that you pick is so critically important to enabling the strategic edge that your board is ultimately going to want you to have so that you can get that extra oomph towards your mission. And so, it can be very challenging when you're a 10-person team, a 15-person team, a 25-person team. It can feel like we just need to get this done and we need to get a technology that works now. But I think taking the time to really find a technology that you can attach your cart to and that you can live with for the long term, I mean, that is so important.
It enables you to, not that it maybe had too much to do with this, but to have your mission of important discussions being had, right, at a national level, right, to the point where it's unavoidable. So that's really powerful stuff.
Well, and it's allowing you to punch above your weight. I mean, that seems to be the ultimate message that you're passing on here, which is what every nonprofit wants to be able to do, especially the smaller ones.
Yeah, and to have the safety and security of the Salesforce ecosystem is incredible. And yeah, I think you mentioned it too, Jake, earlier. Rob, you're getting at it. It's punching above your weight, and it's being able to empower passionate professionals that have never written a line of code. That's about as good as it gets, in our space, in the circles I run in.
Yeah, certainly.
So obviously that was a real pleasure speaking to Andrew. Before we wrap up today, though, I think we would like to maybe cover something new and interesting. So Jacob, being the R&D genius that you are, have you come across anything new that's got you excited?
Yeah, actually, I have come across a kind of a new tool that I thought would be interesting to share with our audience. So this tool is called Napkin AI. So a little bit about this tool. It's essentially generative AI that takes text and generates diagrams from it. So for instance, here I put a little sample text in here about a membership object structure, which is similar to what Nimble AMS has, where you have a membership that shows your term and it's a type of membership and it's attached to an account. Pretty standard stuff. But what's really cool about this tool is it generates these graphics. And it generates a lot of them, so you can kind of pick what sort of style you like, which can come in really handy for different types of presentations or just any sort of documentation you might be dreaming up. So I thought this was really cool. It's a free tool. There's also paid accounts for it, so you can get a little bit more features from it, but it's really cool.
So obviously this thing is focused on moving text to graphics. Are there other tools like that you think that this is maybe a good replacement for, given that it's, for starters, that it's free?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes like to use the Microsoft PowerPoint designer for slides, which is pretty good as well. But I think this actually takes it to the next level, right? This really gives you a ton of different styles. It can incorporate things that you wrote. Like for instance, I wrote some content here about these various object types. And what it's doing is actually adapting that content a little bit and using it to form the graphic, which is, like a next level on top of what PowerPoint Designer can do. Obviously, you could get similar ideas from other generative AI tools, but this is, in my opinion, like a step up from something like ChatGPT or Claude, where it specializes in this graphic side of things.
So like, how long did this take you to build?
I pasted this text in here and it was generated in 5 seconds. So it's really, really fast. It'll also expand on an idea, right? So if you just type like a quick few sentences, it'll expand that idea out to a whole page, and then it'll let you generate graphics at different parts of that page. So specifically for presentations, I think it's super powerful to get to something quickly. And then obviously you can refine from there.
So being a PowerPoint user, would I be able to get the graphics created from this tool then into PowerPoint, or is that not something that you think is possible?
Yeah, you can. So if I do choose to create one of these graphics, right now I'm just kind of showing you the dialogue and browsing through. But if I do choose to create the graphics, you can actually go through and export it as an image. So you'd be able to just use it, then drag it into your PowerPoint presentation. So it's a little bit of an additive tool, but.
No, very nice. It seems like it would be ideal for iterating on an idea that you're trying to build on, and then having it generate image ideas around it might actually help you further flesh out the idea.
Yeah, certainly. I think brainstorming is probably a primary use case of generative AI in general right now. But I like this tool because it does take you to that sort of final step of getting me to a graphic, especially in the technical world. We have a lot of text documentation, which is great, obviously. But when you want to go and show that in a PowerPoint, or you want to, quickly demonstrate an idea, getting to something that's a little more engaging can help give it that little extra bit of pizzazz. So yeah, this is a pretty neat little tool. Definitely recommend. So that was a great discussion with Andrew and sharing that tool, Napkin AI. So kind of exciting stuff there. And this has been another episode of the Beyond Membership podcast.